Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. This is Dan, and this is the Napkin Academy, and I am super excited for our Draw Together session today as we invite none other than Michael Bungay Stanier. Michael, would you please say hello?
Hello, everybody. So glad to be here. Dan and I go way, way back. So being invited to come on to the Napkin Academy is so great. And I have seen the guests that you've had and you are having, and they are amazing. And so I feel pretty lucky to be counted in that elect group of people.
Well, you are, Michael, and it has been a pleasure. It will be a pleasure to be able to share this with you. And it has taken us a long time to get this to work because you are an incredibly busy person. Your schedule is remarkable.
I'm not that busy. I just don't like you that much, Dan.
Well, okay, if that's what...
I've been trying to avoid this for a long time, but eventually you wore me down.
But you know you have to do it at some point. So I applaud your courage for saying, okay, Dan, I'm going to go ahead and do your crazy draw together. So, ladies and gentlemen of the Napkin Academy, I would like you to meet Michael and his box of crayons. Now, I find this to be a beautiful, beautiful drawing. Box of crayons is the name of Michael's business. Michael, would you please tell us why on earth would you name your business Box of Crayons?
Well, I've got two answers to that. One's about the desperation and one's about the possibilities that are open. So when people ask me, why did you call your company Box of Crayons? I say to them, well, when you think of a box of crayons, what do you think of? And Dan, when you think of a box of crayons, what comes up for you?
Two things come up. Immediately, the 64 box and the smell of the wax. And it goes back deeply into my childhood.
Right, so you got that visceral hit. Things that other people say are right along the lines of, well, it's about creativity, it's about possibilities, it's about diversity. And I'm like, exactly, it's all about that. The point of a strong brand is it makes people feel good. That, there's a kind of you get an emotional hit. And it turns out that when you think about Box of Crayons, most people feel pretty good about a box of crayons. So that's and the other thing for me is, like, as soon as I thought of that name, I'm like, oh, that's really different from the marketplace I play in. So it'll stand out. It'll allow me, small company, to kind of punch above my weight. But the truth of the matter, Dan, and this is a quick story, is just to say, when I first moved to Toronto 16 years ago, I knew nobody. I was hustling, trying to build a reputation. I went to give a talk at my local coaching chapter on why coaches' brands suck. And I came up with Michael's 3 essential rules about branding, only to figure out that my own company name at the time failed all 3 of the rules. So I'm like, I don't know. I've either got to change my 3 essential rules or I've got to come up with a better name.
Yeah.
I brainstormed and brainstormed and brainstormed, and I came up with a whole bunch of bad names. But as soon as Box of Crayons showed up in my head, I was like, that is a good name. And so it's proved to be.
I'm curious for another time, what were your 3 rules of branding for coaches? We're going to save that. Let's save that for the end of the session if we still remember.
Perfect.
So
I don't, but I'll make something up for sure.
Yeah, well, remember what those 3 rules were. And usually there's something like, we'll save that for the end. Okay. So where can we find more of Michael? Well, I first got to know Michael because I read this book, Do More, Great Work, which is a fabulous book a few years ago. And then I think, Michael, you might have reached out to me. I don't recall when I had perhaps the back of the napkin come out some years ago.
That's right.
And I remember to this day, and this is what I put in the promotional campaign about this particular draw together, the quote from Oliver Wendell Holmes that you had shared with me that says, I wouldn't give a fig for simplicity on this side of complexity, but I would give whatever it is, my right arm for the simplicity on the other side. Best quote ever.
It's fantastic, isn't it? And I know it's a defining driver for the work that you do, and so too with us. When we think about our values at Box of Crayons, and I keep them right on my desk, and if people can see them.
Oh, yes.
One of the third value right there. So we've got provoke impact, be generous, pursue elegance, have fun, and nurture adult-to-adult relationships. So that's how we try and operate at Box of Crayons. But for me, pursuing elegance is that simplicity on the other side of complexity.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about your most recent book, The Coaching Habit. We're going to be talking about this in more detail. So how does, I love this, pursuing elegance, how did this manifest itself in your most recent book, The Coaching Habit?
That's a great question. So the book's been out about 18 months, and there's a great battle to get this book out. And if people want to read the full story, plus a whole bunch of all the marketing I did, all the tactics I tried to make this book work, There's an article on something called Growth Lab called How I Sold 180,000 Copies of My Book and Doubled the Size of My Business. It's a long article, 8,000 words, but full of tactics and insights about the book. But the way the elegance showed up around this book, Dan, the first was a driving design decision, and it was this. I wanted to write the shortest book I could that would still be useful.
Mm-hmm.
Because I had a strong belief that most business books in particular, and often books in general, just are overwritten. There's just too much stuff. People just go, I'll just add another chapter because I know this. And what's hard is to remove stuff and to trim it down to the essence.
Mm-hmm.
So elegance showed up. The first way was around what's the shortest book I could. And then the second way is just around an insight that I thought was true, was that most people don't read books because they feel daunting. You pick them up and there's this kind of wall of text coming at you. So I wanted to create as much white space as I could. So It's a really strong design ethos as you flick through the book. Ways of just making people, when they pick it up, feel, oh, you know what? I could possibly read a book like this. It's got big print. It doesn't look too heavy.
Yeah.
It's got a real feel to it around how it's designed, so that it is inviting to people rather than not inviting to people. So I'd say those are the two key ways.
And what a genius way to do it. Both of those are something I've tried to achieve as I've been writing more and more books,
Right.
is trying to get each one to be shorter, trying to get each one to be something that if you were to just pick it up in the bookstore exactly as you describe and flip through it, you'd say, yes, I can engage with that. Because
Right,
Michael, you're
exactly.
absolutely right. People don't have the time or for that wall of words. So I'll tell you, Michael, you've got a couple of books out. Very quickly before we dive into our actual draw together session, Michael, just tell us what's up next for you.
So Box of Crayons, when I started at 15 years, it was me doing anything that came down the pike. But now it has a very clear focus. It's a grown-up company. And we do one thing. We just teach 10-minute coaching so busy managers can build stronger teams and get better results.
Yeah.
So we're a training company which just focuses on coaching skills. And I'm the CEO, so my job is to create a vision for the company and to grow the company and help it have the impact that I want it to have in this world. And one of the key things that we're looking at the moment is building partnerships with other training companies and with other folks out in the world to find different ways to get our content, which we think is really good, out into the world. So I'm spending a lot of time trying to figure out who are really good people to play with, to set up relationships with, and then what does it mean to nurture and grow those relationships. So This is new for me. I've been a kind of do-it-myself, solopreneur, make it happen. So this idea of finding ways of cooperating with other people and finding wonderful partners to work with, that's kind of the big adventure for me for the next year or so.
Wow. And it's interesting, again, Michael, so many areas of overlap because in my business, I'm doing something very similar. And as you say, moving from the solopreneur to, and I've tried to capture that a little bit on my screen here, to finding ways to partner globally. And you and I we will talk maybe a little bit more after this, share ideas. And I don't know, maybe we'll have to do another session because I'll bet you there's a lot of people. Oh my gosh, look at the list of people who've joined us now.
Yeah.
Long list of people who I bet would love to hear how do you take your solo brand and get it out there into the world more effectively. So fabulous.
And part of what's cool about this, just in connection to the work that you do, is because what we're talking about is strategy. And I have said for a long time that I think strategy is a visual art, because with strategy, what you're trying to do is draw the future, and then you're trying to draw a path from where you are now to where you're trying to go. And, I saw this great piece that said there's a disproportionate number of successful CEOs who are dyslexic.
Mm-hmm.
And why that's interesting, and you may know this, Dan, is that, if you're dyslexic, you're less good with words. You find those a bit of a struggle. But you often overcompensate by being visually very acute and very strong.
Yes.
So I love that we're talking about this concept of strategy, what we're up to like that, in the context of let's draw together.
Oh, well, and my gosh, we're diving into so many fantastic subjects. And I was so worried that this is going to happen, and here it's happening. So you bring up dyslexia, which is something that I've studied. I'm a little bit dyslexic. I only realized that in hindsight, because when I went to school, there was no such thing as dyslexia. There was just an inability to learn to read as quickly as your peers, whatever. But,
Right.
probably I would say that perhaps the patron saint of that successful CEO dyslexic would be Sir Richard Branson of the
Exactly.
Virgin Group, who, barely made his way through school, couldn't read a spreadsheet or even a book in many times to save his life, but as you say, saw the world in a different way than the rest of us mere mortals. And look what he's been
Yeah.
able to achieve. Charles Schwab,
Exactly.
the financier from San Francisco, same story. Anyway, Michael, oh my gosh,
Yes.
we're going to have to do a second session. But in the meantime, the real reason we're here is because we want to draw together. So Michael, let me ask you this. Are you ready to draw together?
All right. Well, I'm just going to read the rules. I'm just going to send the rules to my lawyer, and
Yeah.
when she's approved it, then I'll be fine with it. Yeah, but yeah, that sounds fine.
Okay, select a
I
topic.
can
We'll
do
draw
that.
it
Five
together.
lines.
You will start. You get to draw 5 lines or write 5 letters. You'll pass the pen digitally. We've practiced this, so we know what we're doing. And we would like you to talk as you draw. So the subjects, the topics, they're drawn from your book, The Coaching Habit. And what I did is I've selected 5 quotes from The Coaching Habit, and
Ooh,
they're hidden behind these 5 doors. So Michael, what I'd like you to do is pick one of these doors. Which one would you like to pick?
perfect. Do you really have 5 doors, or are you just pretending you have 5 doors, and no matter which one I pick, you're going to give
No,
me the
no,
same price?
there are 5 different quotes, and I know which one I want you to pick, but I'm not going to sway you. It's up to you.
Well, purple is my favorite color, but I have to say number 5 is the door that looks most interesting
Yes,
to me. So I'm going to pick
good.
number 5.
Okay, that's the perfect one to start with because here's your quote. Now,
Mm,
Michael, this is your quote, so please go ahead and read it for us.
yes. And what else is the quickest and easiest way to uncover and create new possibilities? We call this the best coaching question in the world in the book. So I love that we've gone there.
Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to draw a picture of what it means and what else, and why is that the quickest and easiest way to uncover and create new possibilities. So, Michael, what I've done is I've kicked in our Zeitboard screen. You may begin, and remember, and what else? How would you draw a picture of the importance of and what else?
So that is me trying to write AWE in a
Oh,
single line because I'm cheating, obviously, as that's the resonant. And
okay,
actually, you know what? I'm just going to get rid of that because I've got a better way of expressing this.
okay.
And then, and what else? And then, and what else? And then and what else? Because what we're doing here is once you ask a question, Dan, you're going to get an answer, but the first answer is never the only answer, and it's rarely the best answer. So what and what else does is it allows you to create extra ripples in a single question, to go
Okay.
deeper, to explore other possibilities. So what I'm imagining here is that and what else stone that you throw into the pond, and ripples of possibilities begin to spread out because you're exploring a little further into there.
Okay, so I've drawn the stone and I've
Yeah,
thrown it
beautiful.
into the pond, and we're
Thank you.
seeing the ripples, and that's
I
my
love it.
2 of my lines. And I actually want to draw, well, I want to draw a person throwing the stone because I'm going to cheat a little and add a little bit too many lines, because it seems to me there's the person asking the question, the
Yes.
person throwing the stone in. Okay, so your turn.
Nice. Good. So what I'm going to go with that, I'm just going to change colors quickly, is what I am is the person who's on the inflatable mattress in the pond here.
Ah,
And with because obviously people can get a bit uncomfortable when they're just kind of going through the motions. But what happens when you get good at coaching, or the way we like to think of it as being more coach-like, is you actually, one of our principles of coaching is to be lazy, which means you get to do less work, but the other person has to do work. So what's happening is this person's getting kicked off her or his comfortable mattress floating in the pond there into the water. Now they have to work, right? Now they actually have to make the motion to get to the bank or wherever they're going.
okay, so let's do that. Let's actually say that on the wherever they're going. I like that too. So there's a person's throwing the stone in, and then there's
Yes.
this bank on the other side. So this is meant to be the bank, and I'll just add a little palm tree over here to let it know. So
Nice.
there's a place that we want to go. Those ripples are going to hit that place. Okay, so
Yeah.
and what else? Let's keep pushing this a little bit further.
Yeah.
What's happening?
So I think what being kicked off the comfortable air mattress. In Australia, we call them lilos. I don't know why we call them lilos, but that's what we call them, lilos. A little bit of cross-cultural education
I
there.
didn't know that.
So now you've got options on how to get the bank, because that's what and what else does. It starts creating options. So one of them is going to be, sail ship that arrives. One of them is going to be a kayak. There's a kayak with the paddles there that are showing up. One of them is swimming. So there's a person swimming, the little arm up there. I know that doesn't look like a person swimming to anybody else.
We get it. It works perfectly.
Yeah. So now you've got three options. To get to the bank. You got the boat, you got the kayak, you got the swimming, and you get to choose which one feels most powerful or most useful for you. You wouldn't have known you would have had the options unless you'd asked the and what else question.
So in a way, the person starting this might think that there is only one option.
Right.
But by asking and what else are rippling waves out. What has happened is our person who was lazy now has to think about do the work.
Do the work, find the best way to get to the bank. And of course, part of them's going, curse you. I thought I trained you to just do the work for me and now I have to work. But what you're doing is you're building capacity and confidence and autonomy and all of that good stuff so that they become a more effective person in their own lives. And, if you're their leader or their manager in their own, for your team as well, you're building a more capable person in your own team.
So Michael, let's take a moment. I want to move on to another quote. I love this one though so much. I want to give it another moment. Can you give us a kind of a practical example? We've talked about, ripples. We've come up with this beautiful visual metaphor. Can you give us a practical example from your coaching habit of where and what else has helped someone?
Yeah. So I'll give people a script so they can actually see how it looks like and it sounds like. So Dan calls me up and he goes, Michael, I'm really struggling here. I need some ideas on how to launch an interesting webinar series. I just don't know how to do it. I got nothing. And part of me is wired to want to leap in and tell Dan what to do. But because I've read the book and because I'm trying to be more coach-like and all of that good stuff, you think to yourself, well, I'm not going to tell them the answer right away or tell you my ideas right away. So I go, well, Dan, that's a good question. But I've actually got some ideas. So, what's one idea that you've already got? And Dan will come up with an idea because they always have ideas. So he'll come up with some idea about how to solve his problem. And I'll go, I love that idea, Dan. That's great. What else could you do? And Dan will be, okay, I could also do this. And then I'll go, great. And what else could you do? And Dan will come up with a third idea. And then if I'm really feeling kind of confident or I want to push them, I'll go, brilliant. Is there anything else you could do? Is there anything else? Is a nice way to kind of begin to wrap it up. And Dan's like, maybe this. And I'm like, fantastic. And then if I'm feeling generous or I've got something to say, I'll go, look, I love all of your ideas. Here's one extra idea that your ideas make me think of. So I'm helping out. I'm contributing to the conversation. And now that person has come up with ideas to solve their own problems.
It's brilliant.
They've worked hard. I've had their back. I've made sure they come up with some good ideas. And I get to sort of say at the end, well, I love all these ideas, but if you had to pick one of these to actually pursue, which one would you want to chase? And Dan will go, well, I love this idea. And I'm like, yeah, you should do that idea. And we're done. 3 minutes coaching. I've solved the problem with him. I've helped him out. But Dan has done the work himself and is feeling smarter, more confident, and more committed to his idea because he came up with it himself.
And this, Michael, goes back to the focus of Box of Crayons, as you mentioned, focusing on one thing to help leaders become more effective by instilling this 10-minute per day coaching habit, which is, and this is one example of that. So, Michael, that's perfect. Do you want to do another one? Can we do another one?
Sure, bring it on.
Let's do another one. Okay, so let me go back to our little doors now. So we picked number 5. What door would you like to pick now?
Well, I think I'm going to go with number 2 because I do love that purple color.
Number 2 says, okay.
Perfect. An almost fail-safe way to start a chat that turns into a real conversation is the question, what's on your mind?
All right.
So in the book, we call this the kickstart question. That's a feather. So here's how I'm explaining it. This is a feather, and when you drop it, what happens with the feather is it kind of goes, yeah, and then and it slowly feels like it's going to hit the ground some stage, but you're never quite sure. And that's what a normal conversation's like. It's a bit lightweight, and it never quite hits the ground. It gets into the really interesting thing. What's on your mind is like a 10-kilo Russian kettlebell. That's what that is. So when you drop it, it just goes boom, and it just gets to the interesting place right away. Because our belief about coaching, particularly in organizational life, is that if you can't coach in 10 minutes or less, you don't have time for coaching. So the question you've then got to ask yourself is, so how do we do this coaching fast? How do we make it an everyday fast way of working? And part of it is to say, you've got to get into the interesting conversations more quickly. And it's a bit like chatting up women at a bar, something that I have not done for 30 years, but this is how I imagine it. Which is like, when you're like, I'm okay talking to women, but how do you get started? What's your opening line? This is about going, let me get a question that gets us somewhere interesting fast. And what's on your mind is it gives them the responsibility to talk, but it says to them, don't tell me anything. Tell me the thing that's exciting you or worrying you or making you anxious. And you get that experience of, boom, you're into something interesting and fast. You've hit ground level, the interesting place, more quickly than another opening line.
In the context of 10-minute coaching, the role of the what's on your mind question, as you said, is to be this Russian kettlebell. Boom, get us there quickly. Once again, to make this real for us, can you give me an example of something that you remember where you came in to coach someone and you asked them what's on your mind, and perhaps they said something to you that was completely unexpected or that you particularly remember? Can you give us an example?
Well, the classic is particularly in organizational life, which is where I spend most of my time, the weekly one-to-one meeting. Okay. And in most organizations, what that does is it deteriorates to somebody reporting out everything they've done in the last week. And honestly, if you've ever seen that or been in that yourself, you've experienced what the energy is like in this. And the energy is like a balloon slowly letting all the air out. Got it. It's like it's boring.
Yeah.
The boss is bored because they're like, I don't really care that much about the minutiae, but I've got to ask you this. The person reporting out is kind of bored, a bit nervous because they're like justifying everything they've done for the last week. And it's like a litany of tasks. However, what I've seen, and this has happened with me, is I go, okay, so I know you're doing a lot, but of everything that's going on for you, what's on your mind? We start talking about the interesting thing, and in some ways the detail doesn't matter, Dan, because what they come up with is whatever matters to them. And then I can be at my most useful and my most supportive as a manager, as a leader, as a human being. And they're going to get the most value possible from this short conversation with me. When I talk to my head of sales today, and I'm like, hey, so what's on your mind? And she knows I'm going to ask that because, I did write a book.
You wrote a book about that.
So I try not to be totally a hypocrite about everything. And Shannon's like, well, here's the thing that's on my mind. I'm onboarding 2 new people. I got this, I got that. I'm finding it hard to know where to choose. I'm like, good, let me help you out with this. And we're into a juicy conversation, far more interesting than me going, Shannon, tell me everything you're doing right now.
What I'd like to do now is use our pictures just for a couple of minutes to explore my question to you. Michael, what do you think it is about the phrasing of this question, what's on your mind, that makes this question uniquely so powerful and evocative? What do you think it is in those words that prompts that response?
Well, I think there are 2 things. It's participant focus centric. So it doesn't say, let me tell you what we're going to talk about or what's the agenda or anything like that. It's focused on them. So they get to choose. And that in itself is an act of leadership because you're giving them responsibility, accountability, the power to kind of decide their own fate. Mm-hmm. Now, in some ways that's hard for you because if you're the person, you're giving them control of the conversation. But subtly, you're not giving them complete control. You're saying, you get to choose, but let's talk about something that matters here. Let's not just talk about any old thing. So you're both creating parameters. It's a bit like your blue box that you've drawn for me to draw in. You're saying, look, we can go anywhere within this blue box, but let's stay within the blue box because the blue box is what's important.
Okay. Here's what I'm getting at. As I was reading through The Coaching Habit, and I read it when the book first came out a year plus ago, and I was going over it over the last couple of days in preparation for this. What I found particularly compelling, as always with you, everything you say is so quotable. Everything boils down to a very simple, elegant summary of the idea. And I know, because it is the simplicity on the other side of complexity,
Right,
that every
right.
word in that quote or in that phrase has been polished and thought about.
Yep,
This
that's
question could
true.
be phrased, what are you thinking? Or this
Yeah,
question could have been
exactly.
phrased, what's bugging you? But you've said,
Right,
what's on your mind?
right.
And
So it's
yeah.
both neutral and inviting.
Mm-hmm.
And Dan, part of it is just I've asked a lot of people a lot of variations on these questions. So there's a degree of quantitative input on this
Okay.
as well around I've just noticed what works best most often with most people. And I'm trying to go, in the book, I'm trying to make this a universally useful book. So I'm like, the odds are this will work for you most of the time.
I like it. I like it a lot. Okay, Michael, this has been fun. And now what I'd like to do is see if we have anybody who has any particular questions. We've got a little bit more time. I'm going to move my screen and I want to try and see if we can do a little bit more drawing. Okay, John Hipsley, who is always coming up with one of our Napkin Academy associates who's been with us for a long time. Mr. Hipsley, can you hear me okay?
Well, loud and clear, Don. Hi there, Michael.
John had, as John always does, an interesting summary of that. John, you want to tell us where that comes?
Sure, from one Aussie to another, Michael. I used to
Perfect.
have a Lilo, and I can certainly vouch for that as being an A1 product, but it was a rubberized mattress popular during the 40s and 70s, so that
Yep.
dates me as well, and probably derived from the L-I-E-L-O-W for lie low on the ground
Yes.
or to relax.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's a classic Australian. Can we make this word shorter? even if it's just losing a couple of letters on the end.
But that does seem to be the.
Right.
I have not yet traveled. I've not yet had the opportunity to travel to Australia, but I sure know a lot of Australians, a lot of Aussies, and there does seem to be a tendency to break things down into the simplest. Maybe that's part of your elegance, Michael, isn't it? Is that kind of just
Maybe,
say it?
maybe that's it.
No
I
more
mean, it's like
feathers wafting back and forth. We're dropping Russian kettlebells, right? Just it's a
that's
lie
it.
low,
That's
damn it.
it. Yeah, exactly. It's like it's like we call barbecues Barbies, we call mosquitoes mozzies.
Yes. There you go. Well, now we've got another question coming in from Hava. Hava, I'm going to turn on your microphone. Okay, now Hava, you had an interesting question. I'm actually going to erase our Lilo, and Hava, the stage is yours. You had a question for Michael. Go ahead.
All right. So there are people who generally kind of wait, especially here in the United States, or maybe even just Chicago. Who knows? I don't get out much. But anyway, they kind of let people design them. And pretty soon they forget how to take control of their own narrative, and they speak others' narratives. So I'm wondering, with your 10-minute coaching, and you're asking these wonderfully simple questions that really provoke them to say what's on their mind, do they gradually, or maybe they always did, but do they gradually, or is it fast that they take control of their narrative maybe? Do they take control of their narrative, and do they self-articulate rather than letting others control them?
What I love what you're pointing to is the heartbeat of the work we try and do at Box of Crayons. So
Michael, I'm sorry, go on, but you must draw as you talk. You need to keep drawing as you're talking.
My heartbeat of the work that we do at Box of Crayons. And it comes from one of my intellectual mentors, which his name is Peter Block. See what I did there, Peter Block? Okay. Thank you very much.
I know Peter Block. I personally know him.
Yeah, so Peter was kind enough to write a blurb for my first book, and I once heard him say he saw his work as giving people responsibility for their own freedom. And so there's my prison cell, Dan. And I think in so many ways in our lives, Harvey, you talk about people losing the sense of their own narrative. But Peter's way of going, how do you take back your own freedom? How do you assume responsibility for your own adult life is the big challenge, because there are so many institutions that want to keep us and this is my attempt at a pacifier, Dan. I don't know
Okay.
if that looks like a pacifier
It works.
to you.
I get it.
But it's like, keep us childish. You know, they keep us like, I've got a boss, she tells me what to do, I follow their orders, and you kind of passively give up into your own life.
Yeah.
And the question that's in the middle of the book, there are 7 questions, but question number 4, we call the foundation question. Oh, I don't know why that's the foundation. It's a foundation question because everything rests on this question. And the question is, what do you want? What do you want? There's want there. Because that is the question that lies at the heart of living an adult relationship. An adult life is to sit with the question about, well, what do I want? You know, not what am I being told, but what do I actually want for myself? And that's a hard question to answer for most of us because we've got all sorts of influences pulling us this way or pulling us that way to try and kind of make it difficult to figure out what we want. But I do think that process of, know thyself is the journey for all of us. And I think these questions are one way of getting better at understanding how do you show up in your own life as an adult.
I want to add something there, and Hava, we're going to keep this open. I'm curious about your comments too. But Michael, the foundational question, what do you want? I once heard therapy, sort of analysis, deep psychotherapy described the simplicity on the other side of complexity as being able to identify what you want and learning how to ask for it. If you were to say that there's a goal for therapy, that is in fact what it is, being able to identify what you want and figuring out how to ask for it. Does that?
Well, I think the build on that I would give you is knowing what you want, being able to ask for what you want. There's the ask, but knowing that the answer may be no, because you don't get everything you want.
Mm-hmm.
And part of life is life's not fair. So sometimes you get a yes, sometimes you get a maybe, sometimes you get a no. But most of us find it hard to even know what we want to ask for, and then to have the courage to ask for it.
Wow,
that's huge.
And I'm going to go to this. We're going to run out of time here in just a moment, but I want to bring this back to the coaching habit. Yeah. Is that a core element? I'm assuming it is. Is that if we were to boil down 10-minute coaching, would it be something related to what we've just discussed?
Well, what's at the heart of, I'm just going to emphasize this heart here. Yeah. What's at the heart of this coaching habit is this piece around helping people in organizations assume responsibility for their own lives. That's the big picture of all of this. Wow. And part of what we're trying to disrupt is the dynamic when the boss is busy saving, fixing, solving, doing the work for the people that she's leading, and in turn having that done to her by her bosses and her bosses. There's a lot of that kind of cascading through our organizations. And it's trying to disrupt that to say, actually, you get to do the work, you get to make the choices, you get to be in control and to have the power within this conversation.
Wow. All right, Michael, a pleasure. So Michael, one more time, thank you. This is Dan and Michael Bungay Stanier signing off from the Napkin Academy. Thanks so much and talk to you soon.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.